The massive alien ship appeared in Earth's orbit without warning on a Tuesday morning in 2087. People across the world looked up at the sky in fear and wonder. The ship was bigger than anything humans had ever built, stretching nearly 5 miles. From end to end, its dark metal surface reflected sunlight in strange patterns as it moved into position above North America Dot in the Pentagon's main crisis room. Commander Richard Cole watched the live satellite feed with a tight feeling in his stomach. Around him, military officers and government officials spoke in hushed, urgent tones. President Elizabeth Warren sat at the head of the table, her face calm, but her eyes showing concern. "Any response to our communications?" she asked. A young communications officer shook his head. "Nothing yet, Madam President. We've tried all frequencies and protocols." Just then, every screen in the room flickered. The satellite feed disappeared, replaced by an image of a creature that looked somewhat like a tall, thin human, but with gray-blue skin, 4 small eyes, and no visible nose. When it spoke, its mouth moved in a way that didn't match the perfect English that came through the speakers. "People of Earth, I am High Commander Zexer of the Krothic Empire. Your world now lies within Imperial territory. You will submit to Imperial authority immediately." The room fell silent. Commander Cole glanced at President Warren, who nodded for the alien to continue. "You will surrender all military capabilities within 1 standard galactic month. You will begin resource tributes according to the schedule we will provide. Failure to comply will result in appropriate disciplinary measures." The alien paused, then added, "This is not a negotiation. This is your new reality." The screens returned to normal. Everyone began talking at once. Quiet. President Warren's voice cut through the noise. "I need options, not panic." She turned to Cole. "Commander, what's your assessment?" Cole had spent 20 years in space defense, preparing for a moment he'd hoped would never come. "Based on the size of their ship and their technology level, they outmatch our military capabilities significantly. But they've made a critical mistake." "Which is?" Warren asked. "They don't know humans very well," Cole said. "If they did, they wouldn't have started with threats." The next 72 hours passed in a blur of emergency meetings, military readiness drills, and frantic diplomacy. The United Nations Security Council met non-stop. For perhaps the first time in history, countries shared intelligence freely. Scientists worked around the clock to analyze the alien vessel. A Krothic ship remained in orbit, silent after its initial message. Then, exactly 3 days after its arrival, every communication device on Earth received another transmission. "Your response period is half complete. Prepare your surrender documents and disarmament protocols." President Warren convened a final meeting with representatives from all major world powers. The Russian President, Chinese Premier, European Union, Chancellor, and leaders from 20 other nations joined via secure video link. "We have 3 options," Warren said. "Submit to their demands, try to negotiate, or refuse." The Chinese Premier spoke first. "Their technology is far beyond ours. Perhaps temporary submission while we learn more." "Submission is not an option," the Russian president cut in. "History has taught us what happens to those who surrender to empires." After 4 hours of debate, they reached a consensus. Humanity would not submit, but neither would they immediately move to hostile action. They would attempt communication. One more time. The next morning, a carefully crafted message was broadcast from every major communications array on Earth and its orbital platforms. It had been written by a team of diplomats, psychologists, and historians, designed to be respectful but firm. "To the Krothic Empire, we receive your message with understanding of its importance. Earth's nations wish to establish peaceful relations with your civilization. However, we must respectfully decline your terms of submission. Humanity asserts its right to self-determination. We invite dialogue to find terms that respect both our sovereignty and your interests in this region of space. The response came. Within minutes, a bright beam shot down from the Krothic ship, precisely targeting the International Space Station. In seconds, the station that had been a symbol of human cooperation in space for over 60 years was reduced to scattered debris. All 47 crew members from 12 nations died instantly. Across Earth, people watched in horror as the fragments of the space station burned up in the atmosphere, creating streaks of light across the sky. In the Pentagon, Commander Cole received the first casualty reports with a grim expression. "They've made their position clear," President Warren said, her voice steady despite the tragedy. "What's our response?" Cole turned to face her. "We've been developing weapons based on our analysis of their ship. Electromagnetic pulse devices, mainly. They might work, or they might not." Warren looked around the room at the assembled military leaders. "Recommendations?" General Alan Mitchell of the Air Force spoke up. "We hit them with everything we've got, Madam President. They've already killed our people. This is an act of war." Admiral Lisa Howard disagreed. "Our conventional weapons will be useless against their shields. We need time to adapt our technology." Warren listened to all the arguments, then made her decision. "We will defend ourselves, but strategically. Commander Cole, implement Defense Plan Delta. Worldwide evacuation of major cities begins immediately. All military assets to hidden locations." As the meeting ended, Warren pulled Cole aside. "Do you think we can win this, Commander?" Cole considered the question carefully. "They expect us to either surrender or be easily defeated. Their confidence suggests they've done this before to other worlds, and it's always worked. But they've never met humans before." He straightened his shoulders. "We won't win through strength alone, Madam President. We'll win through determination, innovation, and the one thing they clearly lack: respect for other life forms." As dawn broke the next day, humanity prepared for a war unlike any in its history. The Krothic Empire had ordered submission. Humanity had chosen war instead. One knew what the cost would be, but Earth would not surrender without a fight. 6 months had passed since the Krothic Empire first appeared in Earth's skies. 6 months of struggle, loss, and unexpected victories. Dr. Susan Miller worked in a large underground lab deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. The facility had been a military storage site before the war. Now it was the main research center for understanding the alien enemy. Susan had not seen daylight in weeks. Her work as lead scientist for Project Insight kept her busy day and night. She looked at the alien data on her screens and rubbed her tired eyes. When General Frank Johnson walked into the lab, she hardly noticed him at first. "Dr. Miller," he said, his voice bringing her back to reality. "I came as soon as I got your message." Susan turned to face the general. He looked tired. Everyone looked tired these days. 3 major cities had been destroyed in Krothic attacks. Millions were dead. But humanity had surprised the aliens with its fierce resistance. "Thank you for coming, General," Susan said. "I've made some important discoveries about the Krothic that could change our approach to the war." She led him to a large display screen showing data charts and alien text. "Look at these records we pulled from the captured scout ship. The Krothic are extremely hierarchical. Their entire society is built on the idea that the strong rule the weak. Asking for peace talks is seen as weakness to them." The general nodded. Slowly. "That explains why they responded to our message with an attack." "Exactly," Susan continued. "And they're confused by our continued resistance. Based on their records, every other species they've encountered either gave up immediately or was easily defeated in a single show of force. So they expected us to just surrender after they destroyed the space station?" Johnson asked. Yes, we're not following their script, and it's throwing them off balance. Susan swiped to a new screen, showing records of other alien species. Look. At this, they've conquered at least 17 other intelligent species. None with our exact level of technology, but several with larger populations. All those species now work as slaves, mining resources, or serving as soldiers. General Johnson studied the information with narrowed eyes. Any potential allies among them? Susan smiled for the first time in days. That's what I wanted to show you. She pulled up biological data on a species called the Vex-Tal. They were conquered about 15 Earth years ago. But unlike the others, they've maintained a resistance movement the entire time. And they've been watching us fight. She played an intercepted transmission. The creature on screen looked somewhat human, but had feathers instead of hair, and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. Its message was simple. Humans fight well. Perhaps we can fight together. Can we communicate with them? Johnson asked, leaning forward with interest. We're working on it, Susan replied. But there's something else. She pulled up schematics of the massive Crawfic command ship still orbiting Earth. We've identified a weakness in their main vessel. Susan pointed to a section near the center of the ship. Their power distribution system has a critical vulnerability. All major systems connect through this node. If we could deliver a quantum disruptor to this exact location, we could disable the entire ship. Johnson stared at the schematics. Getting a team on board would be nearly impossible. Nearly impossible, but not completely impossible, Susan said, especially if we had help from the inside. Over the next month, Susan's team worked to establish communication with the Vex-Tal resistance. It wasn't easy. The aliens used different technologies and spoke a language unlike any on Earth. But both sides were highly motivated. Meanwhile, the war continued. The Crawfic landed forces in Brazil, expecting an easy victory. Instead, they faced fierce resistance from combined South American armies using new weapons designed to penetrate alien armor. The battle ended with a surprising human victory. 2 smaller Crawfic ships were disabled by hastily developed electromagnetic pulse weapons. Each human success seemed to confuse the Crawfic even more. Their attacks became less coordinated, as if they couldn't understand why their standard conquest approach wasn't working out by the 4th month after Susan's discovery. A plan was taking shape. Operation Thunderclap, they called it. A small team would infiltrate the main Crawfic vessel with help from Vex-Tal operatives already working as forced laborers on the ship. They would plant a quantum disruptor at the power distribution node, disabling the ship without destroying it. Captain Paul Wright was chosen to lead the mission. As a former Special Forces operator and pilot, he had the skills needed for such a dangerous operation. His team included Lieutenant Maria Gonzalez, an electronics expert, and Sergeant Kevin Daniels, a weapons specialist. This is a one-way trip, isn't it? Paul asked General Johnson during the final briefing. Johnson didn't sugarcoat it. The chances of extraction are slim. But if you succeed, you'll save millions of lives and possibly turn the tide of this war. Paul nodded. We're ready. The team trained for 3 weeks in a mock-up of the Crawfic ship, built based on scans and information from the Vex-Tal. Every movement, every action was rehearsed until it became muscle memory. The quantum disruptor was Susan's creation. A device no larger than a suitcase, it could generate a field that would disable all Crawfic technology within the ship without harming organic life. It won't destroy the ship, she explained to the team, but it will leave it dead in space. No weapons, no engines, no life support beyond emergency systems. On the night before the mission, Susan found Paul sitting alone in the cafeteria, staring at a photo of a young woman. Your wife? Susan asked. Paul nodded. Amy. She's at the Western refuge camp with her parents. He put the photo away. I told her I'm coming back. Susan sat across from him. The Vextal message came through clearly. They've confirmed the plan and their operatives are in position. Good, Paul said. We launch at 0400. Susan hesitated, then said what she'd come to say. I believe this will work. The science is sound. If you can get the disruptor to the target location, it will work. Paul looked at her with calm determination. Then we'll get it there. It's as simple as that. As Susan walked away, she knew that. Nothing about this mission was simple, but it was necessary. The future of humanity might depend on what happened tomorrow. The Krothic Empire had ordered Earth's submission. Humanity had chosen war instead. And now, perhaps, they had found a way to win. The small stealth shuttle moved silently through space toward the massive Krothic command ship. Captain Paul Wright kept his hands steady on the controls despite his racing heart. The shuttle was tiny compared to the alien vessel they approached. The Krothic ship was nearly 5 kilometers long, a dark monster against the stars. Behind Paul, Lieutenant Maria Gonzalez monitored the sensor jamming equipment while Sergeant Kevin Daniels checked his weapon one last time. Between them sat the quantum disruptor, a device no bigger than a suitcase that might change the course of the war. 3 minutes to insertion point, Paul said quietly. None of them mentioned that this was likely a one-way trip. They had all accepted that reality days ago. Operation Thunderclap was worth the sacrifice if it meant disabling the Krothic command ship. Receiving transmission from Vextal operatives, Maria reported. Internal sabotage successful. Security systems in Section 7G are offline. That's our window, Paul said, adjusting their approach. 60 seconds. The shuttle slipped through a maintenance access port, its hull barely clearing the opening. They landed in a deserted docking bay, the artificial gravity pulling at them. As they touched down, 30 minutes until systems reset, Maria reminded them as they left the shuttle. Kevin carried the quantum disruptor, while Paul led the way with a stolen, Krothic weapon. The corridors were dimly lit with a blue-green light that made their skin look strange. They moved quickly but carefully, following the route they had memorized. From Vextal intelligence, they encountered no Krothic guards in the first section, just as planned. The Vextal came through, Kevin whispered. They really did reroute the security patrols. They reached a junction where 3 corridors met. Paul checked his small display showing their position in the ship. Left here, he said as they turned the corner. They came face to face with 2 Krothic soldiers. There was a moment of surprise on both sides. Then Paul fired the alien weapon. Blue energy burst from it, hitting one guard in the chest. Kevin took down the second with his human rifle, modified to penetrate Krothic armor. Move faster, Paul ordered. They'll find these bodies soon. They ran through the next sections, no longer trying to be completely silent. Speed was more important now. They passed rooms filled with strange equipment and chambers where alien plants grew in tanks. Finally, they reached a large door marked with Krothic symbols. This is it, Maria said, checking her device. Power distribution chamber. Kevin placed a small device on the door lock. There was a soft hiss, and the door slid open. Inside was a large room filled with glowing conduits that pulsed with energy. Bridges crossed over a deep central pit where the conduits all converged at a central node. There, Paul said, pointing to the node. That's where we need to place it. They moved onto the main bridge. The room was eerily empty, with only automated systems managing the power flow. When they reached the central platform, Kevin carefully set down the quantum disruptor. Positioning complete, he said. Maria established the connection to their command center on Earth. Disruptor in position, awaiting final authorization. The response came immediately in General Johnson's voice. Authorization granted. Good luck. Paul entered the activation sequence. The device hung to life, its outer casing beginning to glow with increasing intensity. 2 minutes to full charge, he announced. Let's move. They retreated back the way they had come, moving even faster now. Time was running out. As they approached the section leading to their shuttle, they heard shouting. A Krothic patrol had found the bodies of the guards they had killed. Another way, Paul decided instantly, leading them down a side passage. The new route took them past a large chamber where dozens of aliens that weren't Krothic worked at various stations. These were members of conquered species, forced to serve the Empire. Some looked up as the humans passed, but none raised an alarm. A few even seemed to nod slightly in understanding. They were nearly back to the shuttle when a Krothic officer and 4 guards appeared ahead of them. There was no time for subtlety. Paul and Kevin opened fire immediately. In the ensuing fight, Kevin took a hit to his shoulder. The alien weapon burned through his armor, leaving a smoking wound. "I'm fine," he grunted, still firing with his good arm. They pushed forward, eliminating the Krothic patrol, but not before Maria took a grazing hit to her leg. They limped the final distance to the shuttle, reaching it with less than a minute to spare before the quantum disruptor would activate. Paul helped his injured teammates aboard, then took the pilot's seat. The shuttle lifted off smoothly and slipped back through the maintenance port into open space. They were barely clear of the Krothic ship when the quantum disruptor reached full power. There was no explosion, no dramatic destruction. Instead, a wave of energy visibly pulsed through the massive ship. Section by section, the lights went out. Weapon ports closed. The engines died. The entire vessel went dark, now just a massive, powerless hulk in orbit around Earth. "It worked," Maria whispered, watching through the shuttle's viewport. Kevin laughed despite his pain. "Look at that beautiful sight." Paul allowed himself a small smile as he piloted them away from the disabled command ship. "Mission accomplished," he reported. To Earth Command, "The target is neutralized." Across Earth, people watched their screens as the symbol of their oppression drifted powerless in orbit. Cheers erupted in command centers and refugee camps alike. For the first time since the war began, humanity had scored a decisive victory. In the underground facility beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Susan Miller watched the live feed with tears in her eyes. General Johnson stood beside her, his usual stern expression replaced by one of cautious hope. "They did it," Susan said. "They actually did it." "Yes," Johnson replied. "But this is just the beginning." He was right, of course. The Krothic Empire still controlled vast territories and had many ships. They would respond to this defeat with even greater force. But something fundamental had changed. The empire that had never known defeat had just been humbled by a species they had expected to submit easily. And unknown to the humans at that moment, their victory was being observed by others. Throughout the Krothic Empire, on 17 subjugated worlds, beings of various forms watched the news with growing hope. If humans could strike such a blow against their oppressors, perhaps they could too. The balance of power had shifted. The war was far from over, but a new possibility had emerged. The possibility that the mighty Krothic Empire could be defeated. The Empire had ordered Earth's submission. Humanity had chosen war. And now they had shown that their choice might not have been as hopeless as it first appeared. 1 year had passed since Operation Thunderclap disabled the Krothic command ship. That victory had changed everything. What began as Earth fighting alone had grown into something much larger. Now Ambassador Linda Phillips stood in the Lunar Conference Center, built in the safety of the moon's Tycho crater, watching representatives from 22 different alien species gather for a historic meeting. Linda still found it hard to believe how quickly things had changed. 6 months ago, Most of these species had been unknown to humanity. Now they were allies in what was called the Liberty Coalition. Admiral Scott Peterson approached her, dressed in his formal uniform. He had led many of the space battles against the Krofik in recent months. Quite a sight, isn't it? He said, looking out at the gathered delegates. Each species was different from the others. Some were tall, some short. Some had scales, others fur or feathers. Some breathed air, others needed special masks filled with different gases. The Krofik never expected this, Linda replied. They never thought their conquered worlds would join together. They never expected a lot of things, Peterson said with a small smile. 10,000 years of easy conquests made them overconfident. The Vextal delegation approached them. The Vextal were the feathered humanoids who had first reached out to Earth. Their leader, Commander Ikeda, greeted them with a slight bow. Humans, he said, his translator converting his trilling speech into English. The Krofik fleet movements show they are pulling back from outer systems. They focus their forces on defending their core worlds. Linda nodded. As we predicted, they're falling back to more defensible positions. This has never happened before, Ikeda said. In all our records, the Empire has never given up territory once claimed. Well, they've never faced a coalition like this before, Peterson said, dot around the conference room. New friendships and alliances were forming. The water-dwelling Mershi spoke with Earth's naval commanders about underwater tactics. The insect-like Praxi shared their advanced engineering skills with human scientists. The crystal beings called Lumi, who communicated through patterns of light, demonstrated their sensor technology to Earth's military representatives. Linda felt deeply moved by the scene. Despite all the suffering Earth had endured millions. Dead, cities destroyed, ecosystems damaged, humanity had gained something precious, a place in a larger community of intelligent life. The Krofik ships we captured at Proxima Centauri have been successfully modified with our technology, Ikeda told them. Combined with your quantum disruptor devices, they will form the front line of our push into the Orion sector. And the former Krofik governor we captured? Peterson asked. He continues to provide valuable information, Ikeda replied. Many within the Empire's government doubt the wisdom of continuing this war. There are whispers of disagreement, even among their highest leaders. Linda allowed herself a moment of hope. Then perhaps this conflict will end sooner than we thought. The main conference was about to begin. Delegates took their seats around the large circular table. Linda and Peterson represented Earth, while Ikeda spoke for the Vextal. Leaders from the other liberated worlds each had their place. Linda looked at the empty chair left deliberately at the table. It symbolized the hope that one day a reformed Krofik empire might join this new alliance as equals, not conquerors. Lumi representative, a crystalline being named Zyar, opened the meeting with a display of light patterns that the translators converted to words. 1 year ago, humans showed that the Empire could be defeated. Since then, 12 worlds have freed themselves from Krofik control. 5 more fight for their freedom now. The balance of power shifts with each passing day. ZR's crystal body glowed brighter. But our greatest strength is not in weapons or ships. It is in our unity. For the first time, different species from across the galaxy stand together as equals. This is what the Empire fears most. A holographic display appeared above the table, showing the current state of the galaxy. Krofik territory, once vast, had shrunk significantly. The areas now controlled by the Liberty Coalition glowed green. Admiral Peterson stood to present Earth's report. The Krofik continue to adapt their tactics. They've developed partial countermeasures against our quantum disruptors. However, our scientists and the Praxi engineers have already improved the technology. He showed images of recent battles. The Empire's main advantage remains their numbers. They still control more worlds and ships than we do, but their morale is weakening. We've seen increasing numbers of Krothic soldiers surrendering or even defecting. The Mershi representative, a blue-skinned amphibian named Galtu, spoke next. Our water worlds were once used by the Empire for food production. Now we build submarines and underwater bases that the Krothic cannot detect. From these, we launch attacks on their supply lines. Each representative shared similar stories of resistance and innovation. Species that had once been helpless against the Empire were finding ways to fight back. Technologies were being combined in new ways. Tactics were evolving. When the formal meeting ended, Linda found herself speaking with Naxul, a representative of the Solani, a plant-based species that communicated through scent and touch. Through translators, Naxul explained how their world had been stripped of resources by the Krothic for centuries. We believed resistance was impossible, Naxul said, tendrils moving gently. Then we learned of Earth. You showed us another way. Linda felt humbled. We simply refused to submit. That simple refusal changed everything, Naxul replied. The Krothic built their empire on the assumption that submission was inevitable. You challenged their most basic belief. Later, as the delegates prepared to return to their ships, Linda stood with Peterson near the airlock. Do you think we can really win this? She asked quietly. Peterson considered the question. A year ago, I would have said our best hope was survival. Now? He looked at the diverse group of aliens, former enemies of each other under Krothic rule, now working together. Now I think we're creating something the galaxy has never seen before. Not just defeating an empire, but building a better alternative. Linda watched as the Vextal and Lumi representatives shared information, using a combination of light signals and holographic displays. The Praxi engineers discussed new shield technology with human scientists, species that would never have met. Without this war, we're learning from each other, growing stronger together. The Krothic ordered our submission, Linda said. Instead, they got a revolution. As she prepared to return to Earth for her next diplomatic mission, Linda knew the hardest. Fighting still lay ahead. The Krothic core worlds were heavily defended, and the Empire still commanded vast resources. But with each passing day, the coalition grew stronger. Victory would require more than weapons and tactics. It would demand a fundamental change in how intelligent species interacted among the stars. And that change had already begun. 5 years had passed since the Krothic Empire first appeared in Earth's orbit, demanding submission. Admiral Scott Peterson stood on the observation deck of the Coalition flagship Freedom, watching as the diplomatic shuttle departed for the surface of SciFiPrime, the homeworld of their former enemy. The planet below showed swirls of crimson oceans and emerald landmasses, beautiful despite being home to the civilization that had brought so much suffering to the galaxy. Ambassador Linda Phillips stood beside him, adjusting her formal clothes, one last time before she would board her own shuttle to join the delegation. I never imagined we would see this day, she said quietly. None of us did, Peterson replied. We thought we'd be fighting for decades. The war had ended not with the total defeat of the Krothic, but with something far more revolutionary: internal change within the Empire itself. The rigid hierarchy that had defined their civilization for thousands of years had begun to crack under the pressure of continued defeats and the unprecedented unity of the Liberty Coalition, when the Krothic reformist movement seized control of 3 key military bases and offered a ceasefire. The coalition had been cautious. But 6 months of talks had produced results that exceeded all expectations. Do you think they'll honor the Treaty of Luna? Peterson asked. Linda watched the shuttle enter the atmosphere, carrying representatives from 12 coalition species to the formal peace ceremony. I believe they will, she said. Their old ways failed them. Even their most traditional leaders see that now. The terms of peace were transformative. An end to the Empire's forced tribute system, freedom for all conquered worlds, creation of a galactic council with equal representation, and agreements to defend against threats from unknown regions of space. On Earth, rebuilding continued. The scars of war would remain for generations, but humanity had changed in positive ways too. Old conflicts between nations seemed small after facing extinction together. Technologies developed for fighting were being adapted to heal the planets. Damaged environments. Earth's children now looked to the stars with hope instead of fear. Thousands of young people were training as diplomats, scientists, and cultural exchange specialists. The first mixed species academy had opened in the rebuilt city of Nairobi, with students from 15 different worlds learning together. The Krothic ambassador told me something interesting yesterday, Linda said. Their ancient texts speak of a prophecy that one day they would meet a species that would break the cycle and forge a new path. Peterson raised an eyebrow. And they think that's us? Not just us, Linda corrected. All of us together. The coalition. Linda's shuttle was prepared for departure. As they walked toward the launch bay, they passed crew members from 7 different species all working. Together, a Vextal navigation officer consulted with a human pilot. A Praxi engineer and a Lumi technician adjusted the ship's sensor array. 5 years ago, these species had never met or had been enemies under Krothic rule. I should be going, Linda said as they reached her shuttle. The ceremony begins in 3 hours. Peterson nodded. I'll monitor from here. The Freedom will remain in orbit as a precaution, though I don't expect any problems. Linda smiled at his caution. Always the military man. Old habits, he admitted with a small smile of his own dot as Linda boarded her shuttle. She thought about how far they had all come. The journey to this moment had cost millions of lives across dozens of worlds. But what was emerging from that? Suffering was something unprecedented in the galaxy's history. Her shuttle descended through the atmosphere of SciFiPrime, following the path of the first delegation. Through the viewport, she could see the vast capital city spreading across the landscape. Krothic architecture favored tall, thin spires connected by graceful bridges. Once symbols of imperial power, they now represented something new. The shuttle landed at the ceremonial grounds where Krothic emperors had once received tributes from conquered worlds. Today, it was prepared for the signing of the Galactic Concordat, the formal peace treaty and foundation document for the new Galactic Council. As Linda stepped onto the soil of the Krothic homeworld, she was greeted by Zextal, once a high-ranking military commander, now the leader of the reformist government. Ambassador Phillips, he said, his translator converting his speech to English. Your presence honors us. 5 years ago, those words would have been unthinkable from a Krothic leader. Linda inclined her head respectfully. The honor is mutual, Leader Zextal. They walked together toward the great circular platform where representatives from 32 worlds waited. Some had been part of the Krothic Empire for thousands of years. Others had joined the coalition in the later stages of the war. All were now equals under the terms of the treaty. Your Captain Wright asked to meet with some of our military academy students, Zextal mentioned as they walked. He is sharing the story of Operation Thunderclap. Our young officers are most interested. Linda smiled at the thought. Paul Wright, the captain who had led the mission to disable the Krothic command ship, was now an instructor at Earth Space Defense Academy. That he would be welcome to teach Krothic officers showed how much had changed. There is something I wish to ask, Zextal said, stopping before they reached the platform. Why did Earth refuse to submit? You must have known the risks. You could not have known others would join you. Linda considered the question carefully. Throughout human history, we learned that submission to tyranny never brings peace or safety. It only encourages more demands, more control. We chose to stand for our freedom, even if it meant standing alone. Zextal was silent for a moment. Your choice changed the galaxy, he finally said, including us. For 10,000 years, the Empire knew only conquest and dominance. We believed this was the natural order of things. You showed us another way. The ceremony began as the sun reached its peak in the crimson sky. One by one, representatives approached the central table to place their mark on the treaty. When Linda's turn came, she felt the weight of history as she signed for Earth Dot. As she stepped back, she looked around at this gathering of beings from across the galaxy. Former enemies, now allies. Former rulers and ruled, now equals. The journey had been painful, but the destination was worth the cost. When the last signature was recorded, Zextal addressed the assembly. Today marks the end of the Krothic Empire and the birth of the Galactic Council. We move forward not as conquerors and conquered, but as equals with shared purpose. Later, as Linda prepared to return to the Freedom, she stood with several human and alien colleagues watching the twin moons rise over the Krothic capital. When they ordered our submission, Admiral Peterson said, over the comlink from orbit, they couldn't have imagined this outcome. No, Linda agreed, looking at the diverse group around her. They expected either slaves or enemies. Instead, they found equals. As night fell on SciFiPrime, a new chapter in galactic history began, one written not by conquerors, but by a community of free peoples united by choice rather than force. The Empire had ordered submission. Humanity had chosen war, and together with newfound allies, they had created peace.